I want to introduce the editor of the film, Leslie Simmer. And our co-producer, who actually also shot and did sound and contributed in the editing room, Nicole Docta. So, what'd you think?
Wow.
Who would like to raise their hand and start our conversation? Yes?
Well, actually, I was born and raised near Janesville, so a lot of places look familiar. It's in Janesville's demographic does not have a large African American population. Why did you concentrate on 2/3 of the people being African American?
Can everybody hear the question?
No.
Okay, I'll repeat it. The question was that this gentleman grew up right near Janesville, and he points out that there's a very small African American population in Janesville, so why did we have so many African American characters? And the title, As Goes Janesville, refers more to where the plant is, but as you see, the whole entire story really is about Rock County, which is an area that probably includes wherever you grew up, I would guess.
Milton was it?
Yeah, Milton. So there's Milton, and there's Whitewater, and there's Edgerton, and all these other communities. And so the GM plant drew from all of these different communities, as you know. And Gail and Angie are each in Beloit, which has a much larger African American community. So we struggled with that a little bit. And originally, I thought that we might actually address race as well in a sort of overt way in the film. Which is one reason why I was very interested in Gail's family, because they were one of the first families to integrate the plant back in the 70s. But we ended up not really using that much in the film. So, but thank you for noticing. Yes, sir. You.
Well, I noticed a certain vice presidential candidate is conspicuously absent. I was wondering if he's from there. I was wondering if you could comment on that.
Sure. Why don't I say a little bit, and then Leslie, you should talk a little bit about that too, I think. Because you're well, just a little trivia first is that Paul Ryan, if you didn't know who he's talking about, is from Janesville. Paul Ryan's father was actually law partners of my father-in-law, because my wife is from Janesville, so I have a whole side of the family from Janesville. And Paul's brother, Tobin Ryan, was one of the first people that I actually spent time with when I went down there, and I spent a couple of months just talking to people and learning stories and sort of casting in my head also as I met people. We interviewed Paul twice. We shot with him another 4 or 5 times at various events, Rotary, Town Hall, etc. But in the end, it became so obvious to us early on in the editorial process that the film was really a film driven by intimate access to characters, to people that you're following over this full 2.5 years. And Paul really was one among several people that we had interviews with who would have dropped in more as talking heads to sort of comment on what's happening, but they wouldn't directly be people who you would feel invested in as characters going through all kinds of personal dramas, or who are directly connected to what's happening in their community on a daily basis. So we ended up not using him, just like we didn't use, we interviewed the head of labor relations for GM. We interviewed Obama's car czar and followed him through town. I mean, there were a lot of people on the cutting room floor. You want to say something? Okay. All right, next question has to be for Leslie.
No, really. It's okay.
Oh,
I
yeah,
have
go
a
ahead.
question for Leslie. Leslie, the film at the end made me feel very sad, and it made me feel a little hopeless, like we'll never get the money and the Koch brothers out of politics. Do you have a more optimistic message? You don't have to wear the ball cap. You don't have to be an ambassador for optimism. But is there an optimistic message to take
Please
out
don't.
there?
Well, I mean, the optimistic message is that everyone is sort of keeping on at the end of the film. I mean, the hope is that I think Tim kind of offers some sense of optimism, or at least some pathway in the film, in the sense that he's trying to create a conversation, and by showing this in our film, I think right from the very beginning, Brad really wanted to feature Tim as someone whose goal was to unite people. He was choosing a middle path. And I think that what people do take away from the film, in addition to the fact that they're sad that everyone seems so beleaguered, is that, you know, here is someone who is still trying to bring the sides together, and oh gosh, that used to happen, and can that happen again? And so maybe if that's the message that comes out of it, maybe if people actually grasp onto that, you know, they'll be more reaching across the aisle. I mean, that's the hope at this point. But you know, we wouldn't place a sort of a fake happy ending on the film either, because that wouldn't really be real. So anyway, I hope that people feel some of that hope with respect to moving forward.
Tim had an interesting thing to say, just really quick, to that question when it was asked in Janesville. And he was on the stage with us, and he said, you know, a lot of people in Rock County 5.0 and economic development people everywhere around the country, because after all, we think of Janesville as a microcosm of America, they all are boosters, right? They're all ambassadors of optimism, and they're all really worried about this film not really being an effective tool to attract business to Janesville. However, Tim said an interesting thing. I don't know if you believe him or not, but he said on the stage, you know, if I saw the stories of Cindy and Angie and Gail and the incredible resilience that those women display, that I would want to move my company to Janesville, because that's who would be working for me. And that's a really powerful thing in terms of tools for recruitment. There's a question back here from, can I say who you are? This is Judith Helfand, who's a filmmaker. Many of you might know her films, Blue Vinyl. Anyway, I'm not going to go through all. I'll Be Baby Girl, the first one, which is still one of my favorite. But Judith is really part of the inspiration for why I make films, because way back in 1991 or 90, she was working on a union film called Uprising of 34 about textile workers' strikes in the South. And I was an intern for a not-for-profit that worked on poverty issues in the Deep South, and we were the fiscal sponsor for that film. And so I met Judith and a legend named George Stoney, who's made countless documentaries before he passed away this year. And when they came in, I was sort of like a puppy dog. I was sort of following them around, asking questions about what they do. And then I ended up going to NYU to get a degree in philosophy, which was like one of the stupidest things I ever did, which I didn't quite finish. And then I went back and looked up Judith and looked up George and asked, you know, how I could start doing this. So it was a great pleasure to watch the film next to you.
Wow. Well, I think your degree in philosophy was well used. I'm actually quite amazed. I keep thinking, like, I can't believe they're like, I know you have such great politics, and how could she talk to you like that? Anyway, I'm amazed at the balance and the equity and your humility and the reserve that you brought to both sides, knowing that you're on the other side of the camera. They're wonderful with you, no matter, they trusted you no matter what, which was great. But the thing that sort of upset me was that I like to think of community economic development as a really wonderful progressive thing. And I found them to be, at the end of the day, really cynical and mean. And they don't care. You know, they just don't care on some level. They care with a capital C, but not with a little c. And do you have a different vision for how this can inspire economic development differently? Because I think if this came to town, I'm not sure it's a model for, it's a really cynical model. And I think a lot of us lose. And I don't think it has to be that way. And I think of it differently until now.
Thank you for that question. Did everybody hear that? More or less? I think of the film really as a cautionary tale more than anything else. And part of the outreach that we're doing with this film is something called BizLab, which is an effort to bring business and labor and community groups together to have what I think would be more productive, more imaginative conversations that are more inclusive about how to redevelop local economies. And I want to have this conversation in cities and communities all across America. We're just starting to. Nashville for instance, is where we're going next week, and we're doing a full-fledged biz lab for the first time. We're doing one in Beloit soon too, where we've asked a business school to host us. We're bringing in people who do community economic development, as well as business owners, as well as labor organization leaders, council people. And what we're gonna do is show the film to the public, and then the next day have a breakfast discussion that's more facilitated around exactly how you develop an economy, develop a local community without leaving people out. Because our contention is that if Cindy were in the room when all the other folks from Rock County 5.0 were in the room, and John Beckert from Ford Janesville says maybe we can pay them less, it would be a different conversation. You wouldn't say it. And it was also a difficult balance, not just in terms of trying to provide the audience with a lot of different entry points into the film, no matter what your political assumptions are going in, but it's also a balance, I think, between trying to convey the full breadth of the personalities of the people in it and the practices that they're pursuing, and not letting one sort of, be overbearing on the other. Does that make sense? So, thank you for the question. Way in the back, yes. Yes?